everybody, Pastor Suzy here from First Congregational Church of Braintree in Massachusetts, and I welcome you to this week's edition of Food for the Soul. Today I'm coming to you from Clark's Island in Plymouth, Mass. Now it's part of Plymouth, but situated sort of in Plymouth Bay, Duxbury Bay. It's all a matter of perspective. And today's Food for the Soul is going to be a little bit longer than usual because there's a lot of history to this island. And we have a special tour guide. So I want to introduce you to my brother, Brian Burba. And Brian is going to help us out and give us a little info about the island.
All right, delighted to be here. Happy to tell you guys a little bit about Clark's Island. I'll kick things off with just a little bit about our family. Our dad used to be a commercial fisherman in Plymouth when we were kids, and we used to come out in the bay all the time and work with him sometimes. And we used to take our boats right by Clark's Island. And you know, I always kind of looked at the island, and by some miracle we managed to get a little cottage here 10, 12 years ago or so, and here we are.
And so, how many cottages on the island?
There are 13 cottages on the island. 6 of the cottages are still owned by Watson descendants. Watson inherited, gifted, bought the island from the king in 1690. So there are several families here who go all the way back. We are the newest family, and we will be the new family for 100 years.
All right, well, we're very fortunate to have access to this island. It is completely privately owned. There is one property, 11 acres of the 86-acre island, that is owned by the Duxbury Rural and Historical Society. We have a plane overhead. All right, it's out of the way. And the only time of year the general public can come out is for once a summer. There's a picnic and lecture. And we're going to get to the place of the lecture towards the end of our initial history portion. But first, let's go check out the Duxbury Rural and Historical Society property.
All right, see you soon.
Okay, right now we are at the location of the Cedarfield House, which is the property owned by Duxbury Rural and Historical Society. And Brian here has some information about this house to share.
Yeah, this house was owned by Sarah Wingate Taylor, and she was one of the original Watson families, descended from the Watson families. And she was a poet and author, and I think very well connected in her day. Knew a lot of famous authors who kind of rolled through here. And she ultimately organized a school out of this house that ran for not a long time, but I think maybe 20 years or so. And then ultimately she gifted the property to the Duxbury Rural and Historical Society, and now it's available today and hosts the annual picnic.
And I will share, this is the second oldest property on the island. It was built in 1863, and it was donated to the Historical Society back in 1969. So it was in the Watson-Taylor family for quite a while. And actually, we have a connection to the Taylors.
Well, the Taylors, Skip Taylor, who inherited the other half of Sarah Wingate Taylor's property, his house actually is the oldest house on the island, which originates from 1630, one of the oldest houses in America. And where it connects to us is Skip sold off a little separate piece of property, a little not particularly appealing piece of property, the Smith family, which is who we bought our property from. So in 1969 is when the little strip of dirt that we got broke out from the Watson family. So we're, again, lucky to be here, happy to be here, and happy to be sharing this story with you guys.
Yeah. And I will tell you, Brian does the tour quite often. So this little tour is nothing new. He's got it down really good. So we will now move on to the next location. The next one is actually a little bit creepy, but it's interesting. So let's go.
Hi folks, I'm here again, it's Brian with Pastor Suzy. Now we've made our way over to the Watson graveyard on Clark's Island. It's set off in the middle of the woods. It's a little scary. You just saw the beautiful old beech tree that is the dominating feature here. Here you have a couple of headstones. The Watsons, this is an Abby Watson who was 32 years old sadly when she died in 1865. Then we have Albert Watson, who died in 1853 at 51 years old. Gives you an idea of the Watson family plot. There's a couple of headstones. I'm going to show you one more headstone. Let's take a walk. So as you just saw from the picture, the headstone, the label on the headstone is Abby. And this child died at 2 years and five months old. My understanding, it was the daughter of the other headstone, Abby, that we just saw. So very sad to see a young person's grave site. Though of course we know it wasn't uncommon, sadly, hundreds of years ago when there were so many childhood diseases. But we see it here with the Watsons and the Watson Cemetery. And we've got, I fibbed a little bit, we have one more headstone. Now I'm over here on the edge of the Watson Cemetery to look at this lone headstone from, I believe it's James M. Watson, who died at 65 in 1898. Legend has it that James Watson was a proverbial black sheep of the family, and he was kind of buried over on the side of the graveyard because he had committed a horrible crime. I have been told that it was murder. So when he passed, he was buried on the far side of the cemetery with the black headstone, which is different from all the other headstones that are white. So sort of a kind of a dark history over here in this part of the Watson Cemetery. All right, we're with Pastor Suzy here on Clark's Island, and the tour is going to get a little exciting now. This is my favorite part. If you remember your history, if you read closely, the Pilgrims landed at Provincetown first. That's where they wrote the Mayflower Compact. And there were some folks in the Mayflower crew that had been here before on fishing expeditions, and they believed there was a good harbor across the bay. So the first mate, John Clark, left with a landing party, including Miles Standish and William Bradford, names you might know, and they left in the shallop and they wandered around the interior of Cape Cod looking for Plymouth Harbor. Now, on their way in, they ran into a storm, and the shallop, which was a big open sailboat, and the rudder broke. And in that storm, they crashed on a piece of land that they did not know. And when it was on Saturday, they crashed, they rested. On Sunday, they sought out a place to have to hold the Sabbath, because they weren't going to work on Sunday. So if you kind of step this way, I'll show you. They had the first Sabbath here in Plymouth, in the New World, at this large rock, which after that was forever known as Pulpit Rock. I like to call it the real Plymouth Rock. Well, here we are at Pulpit Rock, and where we left off, the Pilgrims had crash landed on Clark's Island, which was named, not surprisingly, after John Clark. And they were cold, they were wet. They found this rock at the center of the island and they set camp, and the next day they had the first religious service in the New World here at Pulpit Rock. The next day, they left the island in a repaired shallop and found their way into Plymouth Harbor, and there they found an abandoned Wampanoag village. What they didn't know was the Wampanoags had suffered from a horrible smallpox infection that wiped out a lot of the Wampanoag village, and the remainder of them left. They saw the empty fields as a sign of divine intervention, that they had a wonderful spring and open fields ready for their planting the next spring. So that's kind of where the story ends, and it picks up with what you know about the Pilgrims. But Pastor Suzy, what's next?
Okay, part of how we know all this information is because William Bradford wrote a book about it in
about 1670 called Of Plymouth Plantation, and it turned out it was a bestseller of its day. It was read across Europe there was a lot of energy and enthusiasm about the New World, so everybody wanted to read it.
All right, so William Bradford, we're going to go back to the cottage, and I'm going to share a little bit about what he said to the crew on the Mayflower when they first saw land out at Provincetown. So we'll head on back and have our reflection on William Bradford's words. Let's go. Well, this concludes the tour portion of our video, and Brian, I just want to thank you for being a part of this today. It's really exciting for me to have some family involved in this project.
Delighted to be a part of it, First Church. It was great to share the island tour. It's one of my favorite things to do, is to show folks around Clark's Island. So I wish you the best, and I hope you enjoy the reflecting on William Bradford. So take care and see you soon. Bye.
All right, thanks. As I had said, when the Pilgrims first anchored outside of Provincetown, William Bradford gathered all of the people on there, the crew, the passengers, and they had a moment of saying thanks. Bradford at that time read Psalm 100, which I will share with you now. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come into his presence with thanksgiving. Know that the Lord is God. It is he who made us, and we are his. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him. Bless his name. For the Lord is good. His steadfast love endures forever, and his faithfulness to all generations. I like this song because it has such a positive ring to it. And it does have a title. It's referred to as a Psalm of Thanksgiving. It's actually the only psalm to get that title, even though other psalms have elements of thanksgiving. Even Psalms of Lament have a section, they all have a section of giving thanks to God. And in this psalm, there are 7 commands related to worshiping God. They're stated as commands, but I think it's useful to think of them as an invitation. 7 words of invitation for worshiping God. I will review them here. First, make a joyful noise. Worship the Lord. Come into his presence. Know that the Lord is God. Enter his gates. Give thanks. Bless his name. And then there are 2 reasons given for doing these 7 things. The first is that God made us and we are God's people. The second reason is that God is good and loving and faithful. If you put the 2 together, it's saying that we are the people of a good and loving God. That is to say that we, all of humanity, are the subjects of God's love. I think that's a pretty good reason to come into God's presence and to enter God's gates with joy. As it says, make a joyful noise. So when you've had a hard day, when you're overwhelmed by the events going on around you, and when you're filled with confusion and doubt, I encourage you to, at the end of the day, look up Psalm 100 and read it as a reminder of God's goodness and love and God's invitation to join God in your life and in your existence. Many blessings to you, my sisters and brothers. I look forward to seeing you on Sunday.